Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our presentation on automation support for proposal development. I'm Melissa Pay, the former APMP Chesapeake Chapter Chair, and on behalf of the chapter and our featured guests, I thank you for joining us. We're delighted to bring you a panel of developers and users of proposal automation tools, who I'll introduce in a moment. So we can get an idea of how many of you are familiar with proposal automation, we'll be sending a brief survey to everyone on the call. And you can just do through your GoToWebinar, just answer the question, and we'll get a little bit of a tally of understanding what level kind of the entire audience is in terms of understanding and using proposal automation tools. There's also a question function on your screen, and if you have questions that you want to ask throughout the presentation, please go ahead and type those in. And what we will do is collect those and answer them at the end of the presentation, or you may find that your question gets answered during the presentation at a later point. If you still have any questions towards the end, just continue to ask through the question function. Finally, we are making a recording of this webinar and we are posting it online, and we will mail everybody a link to the recording as soon as we get that up and posted. So, I'm very pleased to now introduce our panelists. If I can get there we go. We have Eric Johnson, who is currently a Senior Proposal Manager at General Dynamics Information Technology, executing large federal and civilian proposals. Eric is also leading his organization's deployment of automated tools for use in supporting proposal development. He's led proposal teams that have captured more than $3 billion in revenue for his division. Eric first started writing government contract requirements for tactical weather-observing equipment while in the U.S. Air Force and evaluating prototypes to eventually award contracts to vendors. So he has lots and lots of experience, and we're very pleased to have Eric. Fergal McGovern is VisibleThread's Chief Executive Officer since June 2008 and has extensive experience on how software tools can support and impact marketing, sales, and proposal functions. He's held various senior positions at Dell Computer, Kraft Foods, GTE, and the Bank of Montreal. Mr. McGovern has a BS in Computer Science from University College Dublin, and we're really, really pleased to have him here to talk about proposal automation. Tracy Whitmer is a Senior Proposal Manager with Northrop Grumman, executing large federal government proposals. She started out as a software engineer and moved into program management, and from there into business development. So she has quite a range of experience throughout the proposal process. Tracy likes the pace, structure, and challenge of proposals, finding creative ways to meet customers' requirements. She's been a member of the APMP Chesapeake Chapter Board of Directors since January, and we're also very happy to have Tracy here. I am sending the poll out now. I apologize. There's the poll for you to take. And I'll give everybody a few seconds to go ahead and put their poll in. While you're taking the poll, I'll introduce myself. I'm Melissa Pay. I'm the host of the webinar and an owner of MPM Writing Services. I've been a freelance proposal management and writing consultant for about 10 years, and between the two halves of that time, I was a full-time senior proposal manager for a large organization. Now I work with large and small companies in various proposal team roles and support internal and external communications for my clients. Consulting, as many of you know, involves not only doing the basic tasks of proposal management, but often introducing my clients to tools and technologies that will help them to develop more effective processes and proposals on their own. So I was very excited to be asked to participate in this webinar and offer our APMP members and guests the opportunity to learn more about proposal automation technologies. So Eric, Tracy, and Fergal, thank you for offering us your knowledge and expertise today. Fergal will be describing the various functions of his technology, and Eric and Tracy will be providing their perspective as users and the benefits to them and their organizations of using these kinds of tools. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now and share my screen. Now, our agenda is to talk about the automation features and benefits, have a demonstration of the tool, and to answer questions. I think we've all had the experience of having to develop a whole new strategy based on the answer to a question that we've written to a customer, or to do a full proposal rewrite after the red team kind of rips apart what we thought was a pretty good draft. So today we'll focus on proposal automation tools and how they can support initial proposal development, as well as to help ensure compliance even if requirements change in the middle, adherence to proposal strategies, win themes and discriminators, and ensure accuracy and consistency throughout the proposal document. Fergal will demonstrate how VisibleThread makes many of the routine proposal management tasks less burdensome and allows managers, writers, and reviewers to stay out of the weeds and keep their eyes on the prize of, ensuring that the proposal is responsive and compliant for the customer. Finally, we'll answer general questions and any submitted questions that we haven't already addressed throughout the demonstration. Of course, there are many activities that go into proposal development. I think Shipley has broken them down into something like 96 steps that can take years, as many as 2 years from opportunity identification to post-award tasks. But today we're going to focus on the tactical areas that comprise RFP analysis and proposal generation. The Shipley folks may dispute this, but in my experience as a proposal manager, at least 80% of the effort is put into getting words on paper and making sure that they're clear, compelling, and compliant. So today we're going to look at some of the tactical activities that can be performed more quickly and accurately using automation tools. So how can automation really help on a day-to-day basis? One of the major benefits is time savings. This graph is purely hypothetical, but it demonstrates how saving time on the proposal management tasks, the preparation for reviews, and formatting, which seems to happen, every single day, we've had to reformat, allows more time for thoughtful writing and polishing the content to enhance overall quality and PWin, but saving BMP dollars by having all of the folks focused on your proposal team focused on actually creating a winning proposal and not, going through and looking for acronyms or, any of those other sort of drudgery tasks, if I may say so. So here are some of the benefits of the automation: creating a full compliance matrix, preparing drafts and supplemental materials for color reviews, formatting and formatting and formatting and formatting again to make page count or to fit graphics in or all of those kinds of things, and still tell your story, still maintain your win themes, still maintain the focus on discriminators, and making sure to highlight the compliance and the requirements that you've put a lot of time into figuring out for the customer, and ensure that they all everything makes it into the text in the places where they're going to have the most impact. So time, savings, consistency, coordination and efficiency, and insight and analysis are some of the really terrific benefits of proposal automation tools. And now I'm going to turn the presentation over to our panel. Fergal will start off with an overview of the technology capabilities and then demonstrate a few of its specific functions, and Tracy and Eric will offer their comments about how automation has assisted them in their proposal development processes, both on the ground for specific efforts as well as from an enterprise perspective. So Fergal, it's to you.
Great, thanks so much, Melissa, and thanks so much for inviting us to share our experiences with the audience. So I'm going to run through a couple of key areas of tooling, but I want to kind of give a quick kind of statement. It was interesting, the top point here is around technology overview and state of the state, which is an interesting statement in itself. What Melissa wanted me to talk about is just a viewpoint of automation generally. And I will say, look, automation is as good or as bad as a tool is as good or as bad. So if you get a wonky shovel or a spade, you're not going to do a very good job of actually digging the yard or the garden. And solutions and automation are similar. If the solution is poorly designed, if it's not designed with the user in mind, it's not going to be very effective. It will be largely shelfware and a waste of money. On the other hand, the key is to make sure that it's right for the purpose. Melissa also commented to me when she came upon VisibleThread some years ago. I guess we came into the GovCon market about 6-7 years ago or so. The early versions of VisibleThread were pretty crappy. They weren't that good. And we learned an awful lot during the course of the years that we
I've lost the audio.
So have I.
Eric here as well.
Melissa, can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear, but we've lost Fergal.
Can Melissa hear Fergal, or can she hear us, or both?
I can't hear. I can hear. It seems like everyone
Hi,
but
guys.
Fergal.
My apologies on my line. I apologize for everybody on the call. So I was just saying the state of software is a variable thing, and certainly we've learned a lot about our customers and learned how to do a better job in terms of automation. Today, in the interest of time, I'll just go through a few areas, and perhaps I'll just kind of share really along a certain set of lines. And what I'll do is I'll basically give some overview and commentary on certain of these key areas, and then I'll ask for help and kind of commentary from both Eric on the General Dynamics side and also Tracy on the Northrop side. So one of the first things that everybody on this call will do, certainly in a federal, state, and local context, less common maybe in commercial work, but certainly a mandate in federal, state, and local, is to create what's referred to as a compliance or a responsibility matrix. And the problem with that is that it's highly manual. It's copy-paste stuff. You open up an unformatted document, you get a PDF or a Word doc, and you've got to literally go through and do copy-paste work. The bigger the document, the more you need to work. The problem with that is that you're going to be up against the wall, and you need to kind of get a very quick result. So automation happens to be very good at this stuff. Whilst it won't think for you, it can certainly cut down a huge part of the heavy lifting. Now, automated tools take two approaches to this. So, VisibleThread here will take a certain approach. We're going to take option 2 approach, which is basically to take the doc as is, to not ask you to do any work that's going to force you to kind of mark up or tag the document, and we'll give you a pretty decent output. So we believe in Pareto's rule, which is basically 80-20 rule. 20% of effort for 80% of the benefit. Now, there's a different set of tooling out there, which will, again, it's automation. It's not the way we approach it, but that will ask you to, split out the doc, to maybe open it in Word, to start mark up the heading, mark up the detail, and you spend quite a considerable time prepping the doc for the end use. That also has benefits. You generally get a better output, but you spend a lot more time upfront on that kind of solution. So as I say, we personally take option 2, but you're more than welcome to go with option 1 type tools. What do we mean by option 2? In the context of this, and I'm not sure if one of the panelists is still able to go on mute, or if all the panelists can go on mute. I'm hearing some noise in the background. But option 2 is where you take a simple upload. You upload a doc, a PDF or Word doc. You click one button, and you get a pretty decent output very quickly. And the output I'm showing here is a sample output, which is basically a shred. Now I'm going to switch gears here, and I'm going to show you my screen where I'm going to show you this in live terms. So I'm showing you VisibleThread for Docs, which is our solution. I've got a statement of work on the left. And just to give you a feel for that statement of work, here's what it looks like. If I scroll down on the statement of work, it's pretty typical, right? It's from NASA. It's 21 pages. You would copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste that statement of work. So I'll upload the document. The document is already here. Here's the statement of work. I'll click on this button. It doesn't really matter what I'm clicking on. The important point is look how fast it is to get a decent output that is the starting point of a compliance matrix. Now, it's not a perfect output, but it's a decent output. And that's option 2 approach. That's the quick and dirty approach. That's the approach that gets you 80% of the way there to a reasonable shred. And what I'm getting here is all the content split out by paragraph. I'm also flagging certain keywords that are of interest for me, typically things like will, shall, must. And that's something that we can throw dictionaries at or different search criteria to flag those types of work. So I just want to pause at this point, and I want to kind of invite Eric to maybe contribute some thoughts and comments on this type of capability and how it's working in GDIT.
Yes, thank you, Fergal. One of the things that we have discovered in responding to a variety of RFPs coming from such a huge variety of contract offices and different levels of expertise is they're not always constructed in what we would typically consider a very structured manner, where every one of the paragraphs is numbered subsequently and so on. And what we have found is that even if the paragraphs are not numbered in very logical sequence, the output from VisibleThread offers us reference points within the document, whether it's the page or the paragraph number, that highlights flag words or will, shalls, musts, should, those types of things, and at least gets us to the heart of the document so that when we do create a compliance matrix, we don't miss anything.
Great, thanks so much, Eric. That's interesting stuff. And I will underscore the fact that this is unstructured content you're getting. So the goodness or badness of the outputs will largely be down to whether you're slicing a PDF or a Word doc. We support both. There are solutions out there which will just do Word, and you've got to do a conversion into Word. But really, you've got to kind of suck it and see how it goes from an automation standpoint. The next area I want to go into is comparing RFP versions. You'd wonder why, in the name of anybody, would we go off and build a compare function when Word is a perfectly good compare function involved in it? I mean, you guys are likely using Word compare. And compare is really the situation where you've got a draft RFP versus a second draft, or indeed a draft versus a final. What do you do today? Well, here's what you're doing. In all probability, unless you've got a custom compare tool in play. You're looking at Word compare. It's, of course, free in Word, so that's great. And you're seeing a view like this. And the view is interesting, but there's a lot of stuff going on here. There's a lot of kind of visual cues that are really not what you're looking for. You're looking for a diff, and yet you've got to kind of weed through the 3 panes, or depending on the format you're using, you can often get a 2-pane view. But it's basically for these reasons that we find some issues with Word compare. So it is designed to merge documents, not really differences side by side, and that's a bit of a tricky one. And as you see with the color coding, it's kind of hard to see, or is that difficult to see, or is that difficult to read, the merged paragraphs. So when you're doing this kind of strikeout and combination approach in one artifact, that visually puts a heavy cognitive overhead on all of us. We don't realize it, but it's giving us a headache, basically. So it's hard to identify and also line up the related paragraphs. I mean, this is kind of hard. And the performance levels of Word, if you take a 500-page or even a 100-page PDF and you bang it into Word and open it up, you'll find that Word will not do a very good job on that when, after a number of minutes, it comes back, if it does come back indeed. Fergal? The problem at its core is that, yes?
Excuse me, Fergal, I'm sorry. I'm getting some questions from folks saying that they've lost audio. Sure. It was starting out with 1 or 2 and now it's several people. So I want to make sure that we're getting, that folks are hearing us. And Patrick, if you have any suggestions about how to make sure that that's happening, I'm not sure what the technical issue would be.
Yes, thanks. I just verified it a moment ago. I'll verify it again. So I think Fergal can continue.
Okay, and I would also,
Patrick.
suggest to folks that
Sure.
if you are dialed in by your computer, if you're using your computer audio, maybe try your phone, or vice versa, and see if that might make a difference for you. And all the dial-in information is in your invitation. All right,
Right,
sorry.
thanks so much, Melissa. No worries at all. So we kind of felt that for our business, for the GovCon space, for the space where you're really trying to understand textual differences from a draft to a final, not really intending to merge this stuff, that there was a new solution required. So kind of tongue-in-cheek, we'll say, let's see how VisibleThread compares this stuff. Well, here's what VisibleThread does. Now again, third-party solutions are out there. It's not just VisibleThread doing this. There are certain third-party solutions that will also do this. But the approach is much better. What you have here is on the left-hand side an ability to see what's in the originating document. What you have on the right-hand side is an ability to see the text in the final document or the compared to document. And what you have on both sides of the fence is visual cues, or our visual cues, that articulate very clearly the differences. And what's also really important is that it lines up the headings. So B1.2 in this case is lining up correctly. And if, for instance, all the headings are skewed because there's a renumber, in many comparers, you'll see everything changing, and everything will be flagged as a change, and it dilutes and ruins the effect of what the change is. We will not do that. So the point is that it's much easier to read side by side. We're looking at text changes. We don't care about format changes, because fundamentally, you don't really care about format changes. You're worried about text changes. You can quickly see which paragraphs have changed, identical stuff, modified, deleted. It's Excel. We're generating to Excel, and that's kind of nice because it means that it's a natural reporting solution. So you can add additional columns to this. And then you can exclude, in Excel, which Excel is fantastically good at doing, you can exclude or include certain areas just by using filters in Excel and so forth. So that's a really, really useful capability, and it's something that basically we find is incredibly useful. And Eric, I might actually ask you to actually talk towards that. I think I made a mistake. I think I asked you also to deal with the previous section, but Tracy or Eric, if you can talk towards that, that'd be great.
This is Eric. I'll go ahead and jump in. One of the things that we're going to be exploring more this year in our third year of using VisibleThread is in using the document compare is particularly after a draft has come out and we have sent in questions to the customer suggesting either changes or asking for clarification or something of that nature. What we're going to be doing is examining the final document using VisibleThread and seeing if any of our questions or comments were either attended to or ignored. So that's something that we're going to be exploring more this year.
Great, thanks so much, Eric. That's very interesting. And can you speak toward the transition between, presuming you were using, Word Compare prior to this, or PDF, Adobe Pro Compare? How has that transition been between that versus the Compare that you're seeing in VisibleThread?
Well, it's certainly, as you've alluded to in your presentation, it's a much clearer presentation of where changes have occurred in the document. In our previous efforts to do these document compares, Word certainly served a purpose, but as you mentioned, the additional cross out of words and extra formatting problems that typically showed up and confused the Word effort were if one paragraph at the beginning of the original draft document had been renumbered, it just throws off the entire document through the entire course of it. So it had its problems.
Got it. That's great. I'm just interested in the exact nature of that. That's super. So let me go to a different place.
Fergal?
So this is an area around. Sorry, go ahead.
Hi, Fergal.
Tracy?
This is Tracy. I also wanted to. That's all right. I wanted to just bring out also that we use this tool and the shredding feature and the compare feature. One of the other areas we use it on has been very helpful is on the clauses. themselves that come out with the RFPs. Because we take our clauses, and as part of our compliance and our due diligence corporately, we take all the contract clauses and load them into a repository to ensure, that we're able to meet them from a legal perspective. And this has been very helpful to us in doing that. And also, when they come out with the revisions, draft revisions, and they say, yeah, we didn't change anything other than this one section. Frequently, when you run it through one of these things, you find out, oh no, they dropped this clause, they added that clause. Sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't. But that's been a good highlighting point for us.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for that, Tracy. Very, very interesting. And just on that clause front, what kind of clauses are you searching for in terms of, I'm guessing you're using a kind of a shred combined with a set of search terms that's specific more to individual clauses that are of interest. Can you give examples of that kind of stuff?
What we look for particularly are the clauses. There are the standard clauses, and then there are the less than normal clauses that highlight risk for our company in terms of potentially, for example, exporting and importing technology from other countries, foreign travel, things like that. We look for those kinds of words. Anything that has to do with key personnel clauses. We look for things that talk about types of insurance we're supposed to be carrying, things like that. That's what we look for.
Yeah, and Fergal,
fantastic.
Fergal, Eric, if I could just add one comment. We are continuously modifying our dictionaries for legal flag words and giving those outputs to our contracts and risk management team immediately upon release of a draft or a final RFP.
Brilliant, Eric. That's great. And is the pattern of modifications, is it similar to what Tracy is doing in terms of legal and compliance risk, export-import restrictions, FAR clauses, conflict of interest type stuff? Is that the type of stuff you're doing?
Yes. I just, as a matter of fact, just about 2 weeks ago, I sent my dictionary up to our contracts office and asked them to update it based on any new items that they may have encountered here over the last 6 months or so. We've also flagged words like EVMS, CMMI, PII, those kind of things.
Great, fantastic. Now, for everybody on the call, and apologies for going into the weeds of certain things in VisibleThread, but just to explain, a dictionary, as Eric talks about it and as Tracy talked about it, that's really just a simple way to specify sets of terms that you can configure and search across a broad set of documents. So, for instance, EVMS or flow down clauses or export-import restrictions, it's very easy to search across things. And we'll see a use case in a moment where we're using that to find clearance levels across resumes. So it's a similar idea, and we'll share that and make it more concrete. Fantastic. So let me go to a rather painful place. I only say that because anybody who's got the delight or misfortune to check for acronyms will know that pain. Certainly it is the case in federal, state, and local arenas, less so in commercial, I have to say, that having acronyms that are ill-defined, that have conflicting definitions, repeated definitions or no definitions, it's not for the faint of heart. If you're dealing with tens, hundreds of pages, you check your acronyms, and then you get the next draft, and all of a sudden the acronym check is thrown out. So you get this multiplier pain effect, which is not very nice and not anybody's idea of fun. Now it happens that computing and computers and automation is really good at this stuff if it's designed well. And that if is really important. Many acronym checking technology bases will be predicated on the idea of a kind of a lexicon of terms. You'll download a set of 500 acronyms, and it'll scan the content for that 500 set. We don't believe that that is necessarily the best solution. We think it's a good solution, but we take a slightly different view of this, and it's a bit like the shred approach. There's option 1, option 2. In acronym checking, there's the same kind of idea.
Yes, my name's...
Let me give you an idea of what that looks like. In this report, what we're actually doing is that we're looking for patterns, and the patterns in the document are typically indicated by uppercase, but it's not just as simple as that. There are often upper-lowercase combinations where you might have, DOD, lowercase o, uppercase D.
I was wondering, do you have a recommendation?
Patrick, I think could you put yourself on mute, please?
Like a
Might be Jim. Might be Jim.
Okay. Jim, if you're listening to us, could you put yourself on mute, please?
Yes, he does.
So in this case, the acronym integrity, what the report is showing is that it's an alphabetized list of all acronyms. We're showing in this case conflicting definitions. BGP is defined in one case as Border Gateway Protocol, and in the second way as Border Gateway Protocols, plural. IP might be defined as intellectual property or Internet Protocol. Equally, there's non-definitions going on here. CERT, CIDR, Distributed Denial of Service, DDoS. I'm not sure if you can see that in this report, but that is not defined. And this report is very, very fast and very, very easy to actually get going. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually quickly jump into showing how this thing works in real life. I'll run this across a proposal. This is a proposal that is roughly 60 pages. I'm going to click a button which says extract acronyms. The beauty about this is I don't have to put in the dictionary or kind of a lexicon of acronyms. I just click this button and I get this report, which is basically alphabetized and gives me a very quick way to spot issues. Today, your option, if you're not using automation, your only option is to manually check this. And oftentimes, if you get acronyms wrong, it can be an excuse for a compliance checker or somebody on the other side for a federal agency to not down select you, or it could be a yellow card or red card in that context. The nice thing also about this is that we can take it to Excel, so we can manage the acronyms. A second quick use case that we often find our customers are using in this case is to pull the acronyms from the issuing side document, and that helps kind of populate the glossary of terms that we use in our proposal. In terms of acronyms, Tracy, maybe I might prevail upon you to maybe comment a little bit more upon this whole process, because I know that you do a lot of work in this area.
Yes, thank you very much. We have a lot of work that we do with acronyms because the work we do is technical engineering work, so you get all that technology. We have our customer has their own language that they use. They would deny that, but it's true. And then there's also, of course, the federal acquisition regulations kind of terminology. The other thing that I found this is very good for, one is we tend to go through and look at the government documents first and do the acronym pulls off of those to find out how the government is using IP, for example. But they might talk about intellectual property, but when they use the letters IP, they only use it in the form of Internet Protocol, which would tell me that we would not want to, we don't want to use that as an acronym in our proposal because it will confuse the evaluators. So we use it in that way. The other thing that we use it for, though, this is really important in the work that we do, is our customer tends not to call their projects by real names. They make up names, cover names. They have a cover name generator, and they're strings of words that are put together that frequently don't make much sense. And they're difficult to remember how to spell them and what they are and things. And the acronym finder, because cover names are always done all in uppercase, the acronym finder is a great way to be able to find where we've misspelled the name of the actual program we're bidding or some of the auxiliary programs, and you really don't want to submit a proposal that way. It's a great way to do quality check because when you're dealing with hundreds of pages, a human being just can't do it very well. And I had some tools before using regular expressions to try to find that, and having somebody who does something more of a natural language processing does a lot better job than regex. So that's what we've been using.
Wow, that's great. Sorry, Eric, go ahead.
Fergal, Eric, I just want to let you know that I have my lead editor participating with me in my office today, and she is smiling from ear to ear. She just loves this thing.
Fantastic. Listen, great to hear. I also have to comment, I never thought I'd hear the phrase regex on this call, but thanks, Tracy, for that little one. I can tell your engineering background is coming through. So good stuff. For anyone who doesn't know what a regex is, by the way, on the call, it's a way to define a pattern so that you can match language in any context. So it's a handy-dandy way to kind of get matching going. Cool. Good. Let's move it on. I'm conscious of the time, so I want to go to our next area. And again, look, much of what you're seeing today, you can find it in third-party tools as well as VisibleThread. We like to think our solution is great, but find it out there. Do your own research on this stuff. So the next area I want to talk about is an area that is completely near and dear to my own heart. It's a large part of why we do what we do, and that is readability and clear language, single tone of voice scoring. One of the things that every proposal manager grapples with is the following kind of scenario. You know, you're trying to manage and coordinate a team of folks, and you're trying to get writers helping you. And if you don't have the luxury of writers, I'm sure many of you don't, you're small businesses, so you have to do it all yourselves. You're also talking to IT folks or SMEs who have expertise and knowledge around certain areas. And of course, as night follows day, everybody writes in a different way. And the problem is that there's no good way to say to somebody, your writing sucks. That's a real problem. It's a really hard place to be, particularly if they're giving up their time. You know, they spent some time, you've asked them to write towards cybersecurity, they've written up section 4.2 around cybersecurity, blah, 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 blah. They've written things like regex and all this good stuff, but actually you now need to massage that and get it into a single tone of voice as if the overall proposal was written by one human being. And that's really hard. And the issues are myriad. Are we going to lose the meaning by editing out the stuff? Is the complexity of what has been thrown at me so high that I'm going to alienate my reader? All this stuff goes on, and we spend lots of cycles trying to edit, trying to get page count down, trying to get word count down, and make it impressive, make it clear. So the question is very simple. How the heck do you score and fix this thing in an objective way, and in a way that does not interfere with your current process? Well, what we do is this. We allow you to take Word documents or PDFs. You can upload a whole bunch of these things, and we'll score them. And we're scoring them for readability and clarity. And we're doing it in a way that hopefully makes a lot of sense, and in a way that's very actionable. We're itemizing the core culprits on what makes an unreadable tone. One of the simple indicators of lack of readability and poor clarity is just that simple measure of how many long sentences do you have in a document. If we all think back to our university days, if we went to university, or our high school days, if we were in high school, you know, we are taught to write more complex stuff. You would get more marks if you wrote complex stuff. And of course, that's counter what we're trying to do. We're trying to make the cognitive overload as low as possible for the reader so that they can get to the point fast and they can understand our value proposition. Because fundamentally, we're all trying to sell. And you're just trying to sell a key concept. And that's differentiation as well. So something like
I've lost the audio for Fergal.
I think we just lost you again. Fergal, we don't have your audio.
This is Patrick. I'll be glad to, looks like Fergal might be continuing with the demo. He may have just stopped yet. But clearly what's showing here is in the paragraph phase what the readability is for each paragraph. So if you look up at the top, you're going to see the overall score for the entire document. And now in the middle there, you're going to see paragraph by paragraph the readability scores there. One of the things that we can show is that it not only exports out into a PDF or Excel, but since this was a Word document, it can also export out into an annotated Word document in like a track change mode. So perhaps we'll be able to show that in a moment. So by simply pushing that button, the blue button for the download annotated document, what you'll actually get is a Word document pop up on your screen with the recommended changes noted, as you see right to the right there. So it's a very elegant way of being able to incorporate the changes directly in the next version of your document. Thank you, Fergal. One of the things also is when in the product you hover over those color-coded panels, which will either be red, yellow, or green, depending on how they rate it, it'll actually give you recommendations of, say, passive language, try to get under 2%. Readability, 50% or greater is what you're shooting for. Grade level, perhaps 8. It's also something that's tailored to your specific environment, and you can modify those color codes based on the thresholds you choose.
And as a comment to that, I'll just say too that when you're dealing with a very technical topic area, such as chemical engineering or mechanical engineering or something, where you have a lot of technical specializations, it might show that the readability score is different than it would for something that's more straightforward, like discussing your management approach or something like that. So there's some terminology because specialized language tends to be polysyllabic.
Right.
And this is Eric, and one of the things that we're going to be exploring more this year also is the looking at the migration of the documents from initial annotated outline to a pink team to a red team to a gold team. And what we're going to do is do the readability analysis to see if we see any improvements in the readability scores, the passive language usage, the average sentence lengths, and the long sentences. We should see some improvement from version to version, and that's what we're going to be exploring more of this year.
Thanks for that, Eric. It's Fergal back again. I do apologize, my audio cut out there. Tracy, did you have a comment as well on this whole area, or have you already spoken towards it?
Yeah, I'm sorry you missed it. It was a really fascinating comment, Fergal. But yeah, we could see you making changes to the screen, and I believe Jim was kind of giving a talk as you went through about what you were doing.
Right. Cool.
So go ahead and proceed.
So I guess. Thanks so much. I think as I was talking to myself and not realizing that the phone line had dropped on my side, I guess the big deal for us as we look at this solution, I'm not sure how much I got across, but there are solutions. If you look at automation, there are cheap and cheerful solutions that will do readability for you. They tend to be kind of copy-paste oriented solutions. The point about VisibleThread is that it's designed for a business context where you might have 10, 20, 30, 100 documents that you want to get a high-level view on. And then you can drill into the detail and do the fix cycle very, very fast. But certainly if you're strapped for cash and you have budget issues, from an automation standpoint, there are solutions out there. A good solution called Hemingway is very good for copy-paste activity where you can kind of copy it from your proposal into it. It may fall over a certain size, but certainly if you're strapped for cash, that's always a good way to do it. Cool. I'm going to kind of speed up here a little bit, and hopefully the line will not drop on my side. I just want to talk about how we use things called discovery or kind of concept tracking to identify appropriate sets of content in documents. In this case, it's for resumes and spotting qualifications around resumes. But equally, this view that I'm about to show you is also used for the example that we shared earlier, where you're looking for earned value management, or where you're looking for export import restrictions, etc., through keyword analysis. So the question I'm going to ask here is, how do you know if I've got 20, 30 resumes on my bench? How do you know who's got the right clearance levels, who's got the right certification levels? How do you know technical competencies? Who's a Java or a cyber expert? So we'll just quickly show you how that looks. This is a view from VisibleThread. On the left-hand side, what we're doing is we're checking for certain keywords. And the mechanism here is really quite simple. We're searching for the word security. We're searching for the word SCI. We want to find these in the resumes that we have uploaded into the solution. And each of those resumes is itemized left to right in that kind of grid. The numbers show you kind of a heat map, if you will, of where these occurrences are happening. So I can immediately tell you, without reading it, that Eugene is certainly pretty well qualified from a clearance level perspective, as is Cameron and Cabri and a few of the others. But we can tell really quickly that the first two have no clearance levels. They haven't mentioned it on the resume. Many folks are using this capability for different things, risk analysis using different sets of keywords. So if I throw up a bunch of contracts up here and have the same view, I could easily tell you, who's got, who's talking about indemnification clauses, or what kind of insurance policies are being asked for, what bond clauses are in play, export-import restrictions, and so forth. So this view is a very flexible view that serves a whole bunch of different purposes. So I kind of wanted to show that, and I wanted to kind of pass it on to either Eric or Tracy to kind of comment a little bit further on that view and how you might be using it in your context.
This is Eric. This is another area that we are going to be enhancing our use of VisibleThread, hopefully significantly this year. As we approach a period in the demographics of the technical environment, the resume selections is becoming much more challenging, as well as the government requirements for some of the educational and experience levels. This is going to be a big help for us in starting to weed out candidates in the very early stages that don't meet the minimum qualifications. So we're hopeful that this is going to cut down our workload significantly. Great.
And Tracy, do you have any comments around how you might be using, the search around import-export, using this kind of view?
No, I've not used this feature. I look at this and say, wow, I probably should be.
No worries. We'll certainly follow up to support you afterwards. But yeah, again, this is the way typically that you would do, past performance search. You might search resumes. Equally, you might be actually using this to look at solicitations themselves from a bid, no bid perspective. Because guess what? You can throw a bunch of solicitations up. We had a case some years ago where the particular small business did not support cost-plus accounting, and they were searching for that term, because if they see that term mandated, there's no point in chasing that business. It's a waste of energy and it's a waste of time. So it's kind of better qualification, better upfront analysis. Metrics like this can give you a lot of insight. They're not, of course, the sole determinant of whether you bid, no bid, but they can certainly help. Another example of this is also taking in capability statements from teaming partners. If you take your 10 potential teaming partners in here, upload them, each appears in this kind of matrix, and then you check for the competency sets that you're looking for. You whittle down the teaming partners or potential teaming partners pretty quickly, because their capability statements are, they're blurb about what they're good at doing. So it allows you to get a much better and more focused determination. Good. The final thing I want to talk about is win theme usage and consistency generally. And the idea here is kind of, are we actually aligning ourselves with the customer language? And, as anybody who studies psychology or kind of, body language in general knows, you've kind of established a relationship with somebody if they're mirroring your body language. You're on the same wavelength, per se, quote unquote. And there's a lot of interesting kind of discussion about body language and Mr. Trump and so forth, and that's a whole different study. But in effect, you can apply the same lessons for language in the context of, is the response aligned with the proposal? And you can test that. A simple test might be, if the agency is talking risk abatement and we're talking risk mitigation because that's our boilerplate, well, the agency is subliminally going to get the impression that we do not understand their business. So you can, again, test for this. And we can run keyword checks on the issuing side doc to make sure that we're infusing that language, that preference for language into our response. Of course, there's a simple thing. Are we addressing factors and sub-factors? Are we addressing content in Section M? And again, on the U.S. federal side of things, Section M is where a lot of the beef is. And of course, the statement of work and the performance work statement. So you can test that to make sure that we're addressing that. And of course, you can test to see, are we emphasizing our win themes? So again, dictionaries of differentiation points can run against, we can run those against our response sections to make sure that we're covering out all there is to say about our differentiation. So if our staff turnover is very low, I can put in the keyword saying staff turnover and actually check to make sure that we're actually talking towards that point. And if we're not, we've got an issue. So whatever your 2, 3, 4, 5 win themes are, or differentiation points are, that is checkable across your content. To give you a quick sense of this, this view is where we're looking for consistency and usage. And in fact, this is a slightly different view called discovery, where the solution is automatically pulling out and extracting the key topics and themes at play across documents. So I might just kind of throw it over. I know, Eric, this is an area that you've had a lot of exposure to and you're quite keen on and talking about. You might just talk towards this, if you would.
Yes, thank you, Fergal. Yes, this is one of the key uses of VisibleThread that we are going to be expanding tremendously this year. In addition to not just looking at section L and C, we're also going to be looking at the evaluation criteria and extracting keywords from the evaluation criteria and watching for some type of a mirrored language in the RFP response document. And I've used this on several proposals late last year and one or two this year, and it was very evident from the source documents from the government and comparing it to our response document where those gaps were. So it's been very, very helpful.
Hi, Eric. This is Tracy.
Thanks so much.
I'd like to just chime in on that, because one of the things that we found through the years is that when we're doing the strategic and capture phase of going after a proposal and doing the work, is we have ideas of what we think the government has told us through meetings, through industry days and things like that, what they think are their key themes. And based on what they say their themes are, you go through and you develop what your win themes are. What we like to do is to take this and then go back and compare, one, what are the themes and the recurring words and themes that show up in the PWS or the SAL documents. Then what are the keywords that show up in your section M and your section L, in that you're trying to say the work we're going to do, are you asking us to bid what you're actually going to evaluate against? And what we found is frequently, depending on how tightly coupled the people writing the acquisition documents are to the people that are actually going to execute the program, the more distance there is between them, the more disconnect there's going to be between those technical documents and the eval criteria. And when you have to make those two things, you have to address all of those in the proposal, it makes your strategy very different in terms of how you structure your response. And so this has been very helpful in identifying where those disconnects are when you start comparing the themes across the different documents.
Agree 100%.
Great. So, guys, I guess I have to apologize for the audio issues on my side and for dropping off twice during this webinar. I do apologize. But at this stage, I might just pass back to Melissa, and hopefully your line is much more secure and better than mine. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Fergal. I hope everybody can hear me and hear me fairly clearly. I do have some questions from the audience that I want to make sure that we get to. Let me go ahead and pull those up. Some of them may have been answered to some degree, but I want to make sure that we've gotten, thorough answers to what everybody has been asking. So, starting off with, I know we had the discussion about the different kinds of proposals and different customers and different solutions that companies are offering through their proposals in terms of the readability factor and the grade level that can be set for those, and understanding that more highly technical proposals are going to have a higher grade level. But there is a question about what is the preferred grade level for most sort of average proposals.
Could I just jump in and give a quick comment on that, because it's not an absolute, and then I'd love to hear what the guys have to say. Is that okay, Melissa?
Yes.
So it's a fantastic question, because when you're dealing with technical subject matter, the grade level is dictated by two factors. One is the average syllables per word, and the second, less weighted factor and less important factor, is the degree of long sentences. So for technical subject matter, it is hard to get a good grade level. And by good, I mean, anything below 12 from a grade perspective is kind of hard to get. You'll frequently see 14, 16, 18, 20, 25. But in the example I shared earlier, you'll remember it was the exec summary. So the grade level should be much lower. And people get the wrong end of the stick when it comes to grade level. They think it's better and more impressive to have a higher grade level. In fact, it's exactly the reverse. The lower your grade level, the better it will be, the easier the content will be to understand. But it will certainly get skewed in technical subject matter quite badly. There's no excuse for not chopping your long sentences, removing passive voice, chopping, extreme usage of adverbs, hidden verbs, all these things. But sometimes in technical subject matter, the grade level can be an issue. And just to say, we release typically, 1 to 2 major releases, typically 1 major release and 1 minor release a year. Our summer release will have an ability to whitelist extremely complex terminology so that you're getting a more accurate read of the actual grade level. So in effect, we'll ignore certain terms that you tell us to ignore, and that's coming down the pipe in our summer release. And we're doing that for exactly that reason. It's very difficult to be absolute. I'll share one quick one. We have a customer called Fannie Mae who's on the marketing side. Many of you may be familiar with Fannie Mae, very well-known brand in the US. They have a remit to have all of their content, again, it's a financial services organization, all of their content between 8 and 10, grade level-wise. And that's a really lofty objective and a very good objective, considering that a lot of the content is highly technical in nature and is in the financial services industry. But it's hard to be absolute on exactly what grade level you need to get to. Tracy or Eric, do you have any extra comments on that?
Yes, this is Tracy. One other comment I would say about that, an argument towards going towards a more simple sentence structure and less complex sentences is when you have a customer, if they're looking at doing a lot of evaluation, some customers, what they'll do is they don't actually read your proposal, right? What they do is they shred it and put it into a compliance tool to show that it's compliant with the evaluation criteria. We have customers that do that. Smaller sentences tend to shred easier. So that's another thing that to take into account when you're trying to pick a grade level is to say, well, I want to go with something that's a little bit lower grade level, simpler sentences, so they get the shreds better.
This is Eric. Another option that we're going to continue to explore is that rather than getting a reading level for the entire document, is to put the readability sections in different source documents. For example, if we're concerned about the executive summary, we will just post the executive summary in as a separate document. The same thing with the technical document and another one for the management section. Sometimes that, well, we would hope that it would give us different readability scores and different results, but that's another way of just taking a look at kind of parsing out your own response to see if the readability falls within what you think the customer is going to be accepting.
Great, that's a good discussion, and I see that we have a comment here from one of our attendees who says that he runs the readability report for authors and volume leads before Red Team and shows the improved scores at Red Team so that the senior leadership can see how the document has changed, since the Pink Team version, and cut their review time kind of down, he says, by half. So I think that's really, from a tool and time savings perspective, that's obviously, super efficient. So, kudos for being able to do that. There are also a couple of other questions about the readability piece of it. One is, how does the software deal with graphics? And then there's another question about best practices for word processing and production page layout, and what works for people with that. They're sort of related.
Maybe I might just take the first. I'll take the first part of that, and I'll defer on the second part because we don't do much around that area. But the first part, in terms of graphics, most folks on this call, I expect, will have OCR solutions already in-house. OCR is optical character recognition. In other words, if you get a scanned image or you get a part of the document which is an image, that solution will convert it into text and approximate the text. So in our context with VisibleThread, we do not do that. We look at text-based PDFs or text in documents. The text could be in tables, it could be anywhere, it just needs to be text. It's completely unstructured. But we will not attempt to OCR, and we do it for very simple reasons. We believe that the solutions out there are pretty good. Most people have those solutions already. And we also worry a little bit about the OCR solutions that are out there and implementing it because it's an approximation. So sometimes you can get the data wrong when you convert graphics into text. Anybody who's ever been to a show and used a card reader will know that for sure. You know, handwriting is very hard to interpret, and depending on the font size and style, and depending on the scan image itself and the quality of that image, you get very variable results from an OCR standpoint. I'll leave the other guys to address the second part of the question.
This is Eric. I'll be quite honest, we have not done any thorough analysis as to how VisibleThread handles different types of graphics, whether they be PNGs, AIs, or different types of formatting. So that's something that we probably want to explore with you later, Fergal.
Yep. And with regards to the comment or the question about the layout and readability,
yep.
Really what you're looking for is less about readability than it is about comprehension. That you want a layout that's able to do to achieve and maximize the comprehension, whatever the message is that you're trying to put forth. I think that question is a good question. It's unfortunately, I think, outside the scope of this conversation because there's, you know, desktop publishing people, there's a whole science about how to lay things out to increase sales and comprehension. And I think it's a little outside the scope of this, but it's a good question.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks very much. We've got a couple of other questions. How does the tool handle synonyms when doing keyword searches?
Simple answer, today we certainly don't. So synonyms are not something that we are currently analyzing. It's certainly in our backlog and in our pipeline in terms of product evolution. What we do is we do broad searches or we do narrow searches. So you can effectively put in a kind of a pattern type search where it will look for, you know, customer or customers, but we do not today do synonym matching.
Okay, thank you. And another question is, how do you handle the ability to do work that is not expressed as a certification from someone else? I'm kind of assuming that certification means requirement, but I'm not entirely sure about that.
For my part, I'm not sure I fully understand the question. Eric and Tracy.
Unfortunately, I'm not quite clear as to how to address that one.
Okay, if the gentleman who asked that question would, you know, maybe send in a clarifying question, or, you know, some clarification, we can maybe get to that. We do have a couple of other quick questions, and then I think that, you know, we can just wrap up because we're just about over our time a little bit. So one question that I'm actually quite interested in myself is VisibleThread available in a package that would be affordable by an independent consultant, or is it only available at corporate pricing?
It's a very good question and a very reasonable question. We of course put a ton of engineering into the products and have been for a long time with a fairly big team supporting it and so forth. So we're forced to be kind of economical in terms of how we support our growth and so forth. So that's a lot of waffle to basically say that the pricing is certainly targeted at both communities, small to medium as well as large guys. It's probably somewhat prohibitive for, you know, single boutique shops, but we have, you know, pricing levels that are suitable for large corporates, and we have pricing levels that are better suited for smaller folks. We'll ask, you know, what it depends on the revenue that you're making as to how we kind of divide on that. We do also, for small shops, I should say also, we have an affiliate program which is deeply discounted for folks who are kind of single loan folks. And again, the design of that is a referral-based program, so we're trying to get kind of the message out and make sure that people who engage in that program will refer us onto the clients that they're working with. So we have programs that will match a number of different kind of sizes.
Great. Okay, terrific. All right, we do have the clarification on the previous question. And the question was, how do you handle ability to do work that is not expressed as a certification from somebody else? And it says the clarification is certification like PMP. You could have an excellent program manager without a PMP. And how do you handle that kind of thing when you're doing a keyword search on a resume to see, does the person have the qualification even though they don't have the certification?
For sure, there's no doubt, and it's a great question. The answer is we can't, quite simply, because automation. That's where automation can't do the thinking for you. And there's natural language processing and there's artificial intelligence. We certainly are. There's parts of our product, in particular Discovery, which is leveraging natural language analysis and a little bit of machine learning. That's something that software is getting better at these days, but I'll tell you, it's a long way off getting the best at. So interpreting meaning, interpreting the semantics of something where there isn't some form of literal search is still a long ways off. So in our case, it's very simple. We can't help you do the thinking in that context. But interestingly, if we think about kind of quals and kind of certification levels, let's take the simple example of clearance levels. If you're not seeing TSI or you're not seeing the verb or the word clearance, it's highly unlikely that there's some other way of representing that. That being said, if you don't see PMI, but somebody's a really deep program manager, they probably have Agile, or they probably have experience that can be tested for using literal or kind of partial, pattern matching. But that's a view. But as for semantic interpretation, I think software is a broad category, and Google are doing phenomenal work on this area, but it's still a ways to go on that front. Sentiment analysis is another area that people are trying to do, and again, it's false positives. There's a lot of false positives. There's a lot of irony isn't something that solutions do very well. There's kind of idioms and there's kind of culture context that affects a lot of the interpretation.
Fergal, this is Eric. I think this might be the 80-20 rule coming into effect.
For sure. That's where we would fall in this. We're not going to try and solve the entire 100%. We'll just go as far as machines can confidently go to. But for sure, that would be our perspective on this.
All right, great, thank you. And again, I realize we're over our time by a little bit. There's one final question that I think Tracy maybe touched on a little bit, but I want to make sure it gets answered by Fergal because it was directed to you, Fergal. Are you aware of instances where evaluators may be actually using VisibleThread for dissecting proposals that are submitted?
Yes. I'm not sure if you want more detail, but yes, it's happening. In fact, there's a number of cycles that we're engaged with. It's new. It hasn't been happening as much as you might think, but it's certainly, we're now seeing it, and we're engaged directly with agencies ourselves. I'm not at liberty to name names, but certainly the awareness is increasing across a number of agencies.
Okay, great.
I think for the same reason that we want to automate things, the government evaluators need to automate it too, just for consistency's sake and for speed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's exactly the same. And interestingly, they're hiring in younger folks also. This, and I hope it's not an ageist comment, but it looks like the agencies are getting a bit more flexible in how they approach sourcing stuff like this. So there's a fair number of sources sought out there where they're looking for ways to and looking to inform themselves about how they can actually get better at this stuff as well. So I think you're absolutely right, Tracy. They have the same impetus and the same rationale.
All right, well, thank you all very much. That is the end of the questions. So if we could go to the final slide. Fergal, I think you still have the con. Yes. Thank you all for attending, and thank you for your participation and your questions. We hope you have a better understanding of some of the ways that proposal automation tools can work and help you and your organization be more efficient. Really want to thank Eric Johnson of GDIT, Tracy Whitmer of Northrop Grumman, and Fergal and Patrick from VisibleThread for your time, for all of the work that was put into creating this webinar and making sure that we had good coverage and a good presentation for you. Thank you all for your patience with our audio issues. This will also be pushed out to you with a link so that you can go back and listen to the presentation all over again with all of the works showing as well, if you feel like you would like to do that. So thank you again, and I will say good afternoon to everyone and best success with your proposals.